This morning, President Trump speaking directly to the Muslim world, hoping to find common ground.
Every time a terrorist murders an innocent person and falsely invokes the name of God, it should be an insult to every person of faith.
With leaders of 54 Muslim countries in attendance, the president focused on stamping out extremism.
This is not a battle between different faiths, different sects, or different civilizations. This is a battle between barbaric criminals who seek to obliterate human life and decent people, all in the name of religion. People that want to protect life and want to protect their religion. It's a choice between two futures, and it is a choice America cannot make for you. A better future is only possible if your nations drive out the terrorists and drive out the extremists. Drive them out. Drive them out of your places of worship. Drive them out of your communities. Drive them out of your holy land. And drive them out of this earth. But no discussion of stamping out this threat would be complete without mentioning the government that gives terrorists all three: safe harbor, financial backing, and the social standing needed for recruitment. It is a regime that is responsible for so much instability in that region. I am speaking, of course, of Iran. From Lebanon to Iraq to Yemen, Iran funds arms and trains terrorists, militias, and other extremist groups that spread destruction and chaos across the region. For decades, Iran has fueled the fires of sectarian conflict and terror. It is a government that speaks openly of mass murder, vowing the destruction of Israel, death to America, and ruin for many leaders and nations in this very room. Ever possible, we will seek gradual reforms. This is a battle between good and evil. When we see the scenes of destruction in the wake of terror, we see no signs that those murdered were Jewish or Christian, Shia or Sunni. When we look upon the strains of innocent blood soaked into the ancient ground, we cannot see the faith or sect or tribe of the victims. We see only that they were children of God whose deaths are an insult to all that is holy. I am proud to announce that the nations here today will be signing an agreement to prevent the financing of terrorism, called the Terrorist Financing Targeting Center, co-chaired by the United States and Saudi Arabia, and joined by every member of the Gulf Cooperation Council.
President Trump meeting with one Arab leader after the next. Egypt's President El-Sisi laying on the praise, saying President Trump has a unique personality that is capable of doing the impossible. It prompted laughter in the room, and the president's response?
I agree.
With all that controversy back at home, President Trump looking glad to be so far away. Doing a traditional Saudi dance, typically a symbol of peace after a hard-fought war. And the men fighting with him in that battle back in Washington, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, right here too, dancing with swords. A packed agenda, but not receiving much attention here, human rights.
As a woman here in Saudi Arabia, I wouldn't even be allowed to go into this door at a McDonald's. I would have to go through this side that says family section, completely segregated. There is a wall here that keeps the women separate from the men.
While the president was in town, country star Toby Keith holding a free concert here, American flags lining the stage. In the audience, men only, women not allowed.
The US says it wants to see action from Iran over terrorism and ballistic missile testing. American Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has set out his hopes for the new Hassan Rouhani presidency during a visit to Saudi Arabia.
What I would hope is that Rouhani now has a new term, and that he used that term to begin a process of dismantling Iran's network of terrorism, dismantling its financing of that terrorist network. We also hope that he puts an end to their ballistic missile testing. We also hope that he restores the rights of Iranians.
It was Rouhani who broke the taboo of holding direct talks with the US and struck an international deal to curb Iran's nuclear program in return for relief from economic sanctions.
Meanwhile, Libya likely came up during those talks in Riyadh, and that's, of course, amid rising concerns over the country. On Thursday, at least 140 people were killed in an attack on an airbase in Libya. It's yet another development that threatens the country's fragile peace agreement. CGTN's Yasser Hakim reports from Cairo.
It's the largest casualty yet in one incident for the Libyan National Army led by Khalifa Haftar. The LNA spokesman Ahmed al-Mismari has accused Al-Qaeda and a group allied to the Presidential Council for the attack, a claim denied by the Council. Egypt strongly condemned the incident and called for the perpetrators to be brought to justice. Egypt has always backed Khalifa Haftar in his crackdown on ISIL and other extremist Islamist militias in Libya. Cairo has been training soldiers from Haftar's Libyan National Army, as well as providing it with logistical and intelligence support. The Arab League has also denounced the Barak al-Shatti, describing it as a barbaric attack that threatens to pull Libya back into turmoil. The League emphasized that the only solution to the Libyan conflict is through diplomacy, not violence. An envoy from the institution will be traveling to Libya this week to push for peace talks between rival parties based on the UN Sukhayrat agreement. The Arab League hopes that it can defuse the crisis before it escalates even further.
Unknown armed men shot dead a German woman and beheaded her bodyguard in Afghanistan's capital Kabul on Sunday. The country's interior ministry says the attackers stormed a guest house run by a Swedish NGO. A second Finnish woman is missing and possibly has been kidnapped. Insurgent groups such as the Taliban and Islamic State often carry out attacks in Afghanistan. In a separate development, at least 20 Afghan policemen were killed while Taliban fighters stormed multiple security outposts in the volatile southern province of Zabul. The attack was a stinging blow to NATO-backed Afghan forces.
U.S. President Donald Trump's visit to the occupied Palestinian territories is not welcomed by the Palestinians. In a statement issued Saturday, Palestinian factions called for a day of rage on Tuesday, when Trump is scheduled to meet with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in the occupied West Bank city of Bethlehem. The factions say that they reject the U.S. positions that support the Israeli occupation, and that they also oppose any American-sponsored negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
Trump should only be greeted by angry protests and demonstrations. It should be a day of rage, to send him a message that the Palestinian people are adherent to their national rights. All American administrations have always been against our people's rights, and their positions were always in support of Israel.
Trump will arrive in Israel on Monday and will hold a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. According to the Israeli media, Netanyahu and Trump are expected to discuss prospects for peace negotiations and security issues. It said that Trump is formulating a plan to restart peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians under American mediation. However, according to experts here, it's unlikely that Trump will propose anything new. He would ask Tel Aviv to curb illegal settlement activity in the occupied territories and would ask Abbas to stop incitement against Israel.
On Sunday, 3 Palestinians were delivered a death sentence by the ruling Hamas government in Gaza. The ruling stated that the 3 took part in an Israeli-directed assassination of one of the group's senior commanders. A security court for Hamas said the 3 confessed to the March 24th killing of wing commander Mazen Fukaha, who was shot in the head near his home in Gaza. Brigadier General Nasser Suleiman, chairman of Hamas-run military judiciary, said the field court has sentenced the three convicted of carrying out the crime of the assassination of martyr Mazen Fukaha to death.
The New York Times reported on Saturday China killed or imprisoned 18 to 20 CIA sources from 2010 to 2012 in a massive intelligence breach whose origin has not been identified. The executions hobbled U.S. spying operations. Citing current and former U.S. officials, the newspaper reported that investigators remain divided over the origin, whether there was a spy within the Central Intelligence Agency who betrayed the sources, or whether the Chinese hacked the CIA's covert communication system. Dismantling a network that was years in the making, the newspaper reported, the Chinese killed at least a dozen people providing information to the CIA from 2010 through 2012.
Dozens of Coptic Christian families in Egypt, displaced by the recent rise of ISIS attacks targeting them, have been moved into so-called camps or aid buildings. But the Coptic seeking refuge from their own government are now saying that the El-Sisi administration is ignoring their basic human needs. Joining me now to discuss is Ahmed Ben Shamsi, Communications and Advocacy Director for the Middle East and North Africa at the Human Rights Watch. Ahmed, thank you for being with us today. Can you please tell us a little bit more about these conditions of the camps?
We don't have verified information on these camps. What we know is that the Coptic population in Egypt is in a quite difficult position in general. I mean, the renowned Coptic scholar called Samuel Tadros recently penned a long study in which he explained that Copts basically have never been equal Egyptian citizens in the eyes of the law. And he even called them second-class citizens based on all the regulations that they are subjected to. For example, you cannot build a church that easily when you're a Coptic citizen, and in Egypt it is subjected to many regulations that tend to prove that it's discrimination, basically. They must follow, according to that scholar, Islamic inheritance laws, cannot adopt children, excluded from important government positions, and so forth and so on. So, yes, the situation of the Copts in Egypt is quite grim.
Kim Jong-un was photographed on Friday, congratulating rocket scientists who carried out North Korea's most successful test to date last Sunday. 7 days later, another test from North Korea, which was immediately detected in the south.
North Korea today fired a ballistic missile again. North Korea's repeated provocative action went against our government and the international community's expectations and desire to establish peace and denuclearization in the Korean peninsula. The South Korean government strongly condemns its irresponsible and reckless behavior.
Video of the latest missile test hasn't been released by North Korea. This was last Sunday's missile launch, regarded as the regime's most successful to date, with a new type of missile which flew almost 800 kilometres and reached an altitude of 2,000 kilometres. The governments of South Korea and Japan say this latest missile has been tested before and flew for 560 kilometres before crashing into the Sea of Japan. Two tests a week apart suggests the pace of North Korea's missile testing is accelerating.
This launch presented a grave problem from the perspective of ensuring safety of aircraft and vessels. It was also a clear violation of the United Nations Security Council resolution. Japan cannot accept North Korea's repeated provocation, and we have launched a strong protest against North Korea.
Japan's Prime Minister says he will raise the missile issue at the G7 summit of world leaders next week in Italy. Shinzo Abe is due to meet Donald Trump there. White House staff say they were half expecting some sort of provocation from North Korea while the US president was on his first foreign trip. A missile test is less serious than a nuclear test would have been. What is significant is that this test has come so quickly after last week's, the regime's most successful to date. Even after that test, South Korea's new moderate president said he was still open to talks with Pyongyang, but North Korea doesn't seem remotely interested.
I am better off in saying that my favorite hero is Putin.
That was Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte in October last year, responding to a question about whether he preferred Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump in the White House. Duterte has made no secret his admiration for Russian President Vladimir Putin and his desire to meet the Russian leader. It didn't take long for that to happen. They held their first bilateral meeting last November at the APEC summit in Peru, after which Duterte says Putin said to him,
"Don't forget to visit Russia."
So now the time has come. Duterte is visiting Russia this week, where he and Putin will be witnessing the signing of several bilateral agreements, including in the areas of defense and security.
We are ready to supply small arms and light weapons, so airplanes, helicopters, submarines. Our interest is to combine our efforts with all interested partners around the world in order to effectively cope with the common threats to security and sustainable development.
Perhaps as an initial gesture of friendship, the Russian Navy has docked twice in Manila this year. On both occasions, President Duterte personally welcomed the warships. Russian military vessels have been to the Philippines before, but never with this kind of fanfare. Also ahead of Duterte's trip, Russia released 17 Filipinos who were briefly detained but were found to have been illegally recruited. The friendship between Russia and the Philippines may have started with a personal rapport, if you will, between Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte and Russian President Vladimir Putin. But Duterte's visit to Moscow could now determine how ties between both countries will develop further.
Taiwanese Health Minister Chen Shih-chung told Reuters on Saturday Taiwan hopes its allies will stand up to China's coercion and threats that have shut it out of the UN's annual World Health Assembly. Thousands of delegates from the World Health Organization's 194 members will attend the Geneva meeting this week. Chen's delegation and Taiwanese media, however, are barred from entry. Chen said, "I have to call on China to realize the traditional wisdom of Chinese culture, which is that people are won over by goodwill instead of coercion and threats. That is how a big country should present itself to the world." China views democratic Taiwan as a renegade province to be retaken with the use of force if necessary.
Turkey's president is tightening his grip on power in the country again. Recep Tayyip Erdogan took back leadership of the AKP, the party he helped found in 2001. The party met Sunday in Ankara to give control back to Erdogan. To try and maintain presidential neutrality, Turkey's previous constitution didn't allow the president to be a member of any political party. But that rule and many others were changed in a recent referendum. Erdogan will have unprecedented power within the country, controlling both the executive branch and the largest political party in parliament. And as head of the country and the party, he now has a lot more freedom to make political appointments based on favor rather than ability. Erdogan has been consolidating power since a failed coup last July. Over 100,000 people have lost their jobs or been jailed or arrested in the past year. Turkey has been in a state of emergency since the coup attempt. Erdogan recently said he won't be lifting it anytime soon.
There are reports of at least 80 people being arrested in the Colombian city of Buenaventura after a days-long and mostly peaceful strike turned violent. Local media reports at least one person died in the fracas and 10 police officers were injured. It was sad to see the people of Buenaventura like that. It was a complete loss, destruction. And we're just waiting to see how we're going to move past this tragedy that's come with a strike that was peaceful but ended tragically. Looting and vandalism followed in the Pacific port city as anger mounted over a lack of access to basic amenities, such as running water. The government said it respected the peaceful protests, but warned it would not tolerate violence.
Massive demonstrations, violence, and a rising death toll marked 50 consecutive days of anti-government protests in Venezuela. Hundreds marched on Saturday while some flanked a gigantic sign that read "Elections Now" over an overpass. Opposition leader Miguel Pizarro wrote on Twitter, 50 days facing threats, tear gas, and pellets. 50 days in which we have transformed fear into courage and strength. Protests turned violent in Caracas later on Saturday, when demonstrators and police clashed surrounded by a mix of tear gas and exploding Molotov cocktails. The Attorney General's office is investigating 47 protest-related deaths. Some deaths have been linked to both opposition and pro-government protests, while others happened during acts of vandalism unrelated to the political unrest.
With Saudi Arabia saying most participants are on board with the plan to rein in a global supply glut, OPEC and other oil producers are on course to agree to an extension of supply cuts at a meeting on Thursday. On Sunday, Saudi Arabia's energy minister said that extending the supply cuts by a further 9 months until next March and adding 1 or 2 small producers to the pact should reduce oil inventories to their 5-year average. It is a key gauge for OPEC to monitor the success of the initiative. Khalid Al-Falih told a news conference in Riyadh, "Everyone I talked to expressed support and enthusiasm to join in this direction, but of course it doesn't preempt any creative suggestions that may come about."
The World Health Organization says the cholera epidemic in Yemen could reach 300,000 cases within 6 months. A representative of the UN Health Agency has warned of an extremely high death toll, describing the outbreak as unprecedented. At least 242 people have died of cholera over the past 3 weeks alone. Tens of thousands of others have been diagnosed with the disease.
Japan is experiencing an unusually hot spell of weather for the time of year. While not currently proving as dangerous as recent deadly summer heat waves, more than 450 people have been hospitalized in the space of a week. With temperatures hovering around the upper 30s Celsius, the country's meteorological society has created a smartphone app offering advice on heat stroke prevention methods.